Fate and Existence, a novel by Dale M. Chatwin. Prologue. Two brothers. They materialized out of the fog as spectres entering the underworld. Stood upon the small trawler, they sailed back to Budleigh Salterton. They were not the passengers of Chauron, and neither had they stolen the floating vessel like phantasmagorical thieves on the river Styx. The two souls, silhouetted against the morning mist, were brothers who had been on a brief journey along the Jurassic coast, around the corners of craggy cliffs. The fog was like a primordial ooze, where the relics of an ancient past leaked through, and foaming waves licked the jagged rocks like rabid tongues. It was during their passage back to the mainland when they saw a lonely albatross fly overhead. Jasper could see its immense dark wings standing out against the grey sky like a herald of some terrible biblical event. A mythological beast with an 11-foot wingspan paving the way for mankind's demise. These doom-laden thoughts in his mind were mere whimsical musings. The sight of the albatross did not give him cause to see it as an omen. He only saw it as a solitary bird lost along the Jurassic coast. Jasper nudged his brother, pointed up, and saw a smile that penetrated the gloomy day with glorious radiance. Both of them gazed in awe. Neither had seen an albatross before, and its weaving movements through the clouds were hypnotic. They looked into each other's blue eyes and felt they had achieved all they could, that the peak had been reached, and from there on in there was only a descent into the unknown. The boat dipped in the undulating waves, and for a moment Jasper nearly lost his footing. He held on to his brother for support. Dalton never took his other hand off the wheel. His other arm was locked into Jasper's, and when they looked overhead, the albatross had disappeared, like it had performed a clandestine magic trick that only albatross knew. From the distant cliffs, a gulp of cormorants cackled, and the waves developed a psychedelic curdling sound as water ebbed and flowed, and the boat cut through Poseidon's domain with relative ease. The salty spray of sea water flicked Jasper's face with moisture, and he licked his lips, tasting the saltiness, and breathed in a lungful of sea air. "I didn't know there were any albatross around here," he said, after pondering the elusive bird's existence. "It's an extreme rarity. According to the locals, that albatross has been alone in the area for 10 years, after it was blown off course in the South Atlantic," said Dalton. "It will never find a mate, will never breed future generations to coast along this alien water that to them would be called home. Instead, it will roam the heavens of this strange land, searching for something that cannot exist within the scope of its reasoning. It is a solitary omen to those who have ever loved and lost." That was the first time I've seen it. I had always thought it was just a local legend. When it started to rain, neither brother cared, because together they had shared the rarest of moments. As the briny aromas of seaweed and the churning ocean wafted around them, they came to realize that this was a sacred moment. Neither one of them had taken out their phones to film the occasion, or post about it on social media. They had savored the rare sight, and that must have meant something. Maybe one day I'll tell Ulysses all about this. For now, let this moment be ours, little brother. Let us keep this moment between each other, so that we know we are bound not only in blood, but in spirit," said Dalton, placing a hand on Jasper's shoulder, who smiled and nodded at his older brother. The sound of the boat's engine trundling across the choppy water soothed Jasper. He loved the ocean. "I love this boat," said Jasper, It was one of the reasons why he had gone to Budleigh Salterton. Dalton had called him up a week previously, excited to announce the news that he finally owned a boat. It wasn't a luxury boat, not a yacht or something excessive, but a former fishing boat, once owned by a Cornish gentleman. Dalton was in the process of sprucing it up and transforming it into his own kind of yacht, one that had character. Jasper had leapt at the chance and drove down to Devon. "Ah, she's a busting bit of boat," said Dalton, in his native black country dialect. Jasper giggled. "In all the excitement earlier on this morning, seeing you and Rosie and Ulysses, I forgot to ask what she's called," he said. "I've named her the Siren Eater. You see, Jasper, a siren represents a person who wants you to live in the past. They strive to make you look forever into what has already happened and cannot be changed, so the mind is racked with guilt and regret. The past must be eaten away so you can look forward to the future, or something better. I remember when I was approaching the membrane, the ominous hexagonal veil that separates realities, and passed through this metaphysical tunnel. There was a siren in my soul trying to beckon me to turn back by flashing images of my past upon the walls. Something was stopping me from moving forward, from going beyond the membrane. I ate it, and swallowed the bittersweet memories and moved on. The past is important, but this boat reminds me that I cannot dwell on it for too long, lest I be eaten instead." A cormorant sketched the air above, stalking its aquatic farm with reptilian curiosity. It dived, forming a black M against the grey day, and harvested a fish from the waves. It promptly flew off, back to its primitive cliffside dwelling. "I'm moving to Southsea in a couple of months," said Jasper in a sudden shift of the conversation. Dalton stared in amazement. "Ha! Well, blow me away. What makes you want to do that, kidder?" "I want to go to university, and I want to live by the sea. I know the area pretty well from when I used to visit you with Dad. It just made sense," said Jasper, shrugging his shoulders and looking away across the ocean that looked like liquid iron. He was telling the truth, but there was another reason why he had chosen Southsea. He could not bring himself to tell Dalton. Not yet. "I'm happy for you. I think you need it. You've spent too long living with Mom under that roof, and I think some independence will do you good." "I'm a late bloomer," said Jasper, and smiled nervously. "Don't worry. I was too. I'm surprised you stayed at home for so long, especially since you passed your driving test. I thought you would have been hitting the road and exploring." "I wanted to. Something always held me back. Not Mom, by the way. Just something in my head." Jasper frowned, his eyes hiding a secret. Dalton looked at his brother with concern. "Jasp, what's the matter?" he asked. "Nothing. It's not worth going into. You've always been a reserved chap. You know you can talk to me." "Thank you," said Jasper, and he tipped a tentative nod to Dalton. He thought he saw a dolphin breach the water in the corner of his eye. It was only another grey wave. There was a moment of silence as each man absorbed the ambience of the tide. The boat's engine chugged away, and the cackling of the cormorants was carried off by a possessive zephyr out into the open waters to dissipate above an aqueous, arid region. It does one good to get out and see the world, and at least you're moving under your own conditions. Not like what happened to me. Now it was Dalton's turn to stare out across the waves. Only he had the stirrings of tears in his eyes as memories lapped at the shores of his conscious mind. Memories that left behind broken images that cracked like seashells under the pressure of all those years gone by. "What does Mom say?" asked Dalton once he had snapped out of his abyssal trance. "You know what she's like. One minute she's happy for me, the next she's yelling saying I'm abandoning her. She doesn't cry, but I know she cried terribly after you had gone. And I know she will do the same once I am gone." This made Dalton wince. "Is it right for me to move away?" Jasper asked suddenly. He sought reassurance in his brother and hoped he would find it out on those waters where life beyond the waves seemed inconsequential. Well, brother, no one can really say if it's right or wrong. I struggled for many years with that question. Should families really separate so dramatically? Or are we bound by something beyond our understanding to stay and be tethered against the will that entices us to other pastures? You have to seek your own life, Jasp. You have to write your own story now. This is your time, your journey. No one can interfere with that. The path laid before you is a stark landscape bereft of any detail. Only you can populate it, with memories, with physical encounters, with love made and love lost, with friendships formed from the ether of mutual appreciations that will last until the end of creation or become buried treasures of the past. This landscape will contain your inner musings, your evolving desires. It will be a discovery of yourself and your capabilities, and hopefully this will all lead to an ending that you can be proud of, that upon your death you can close your eyes and know that you did it right. Jasper smiled, and a wave of love for his older brother swept him nearly to tears. At that moment he saw a seal's head poke from beneath the ocean waves like a marine mole. He had to get it off his chest, this burden that constantly tried to yank his heart down to Davy Jones' locker, and the only person he could tell was his big brother. Cassie broke up with me, he said, and instantly took in a deep breath and exhaled sharply. Dalton gawped. What the hell happened there? You two were well suited for each other, from what I could tell. It happened unexpectedly. She said she wasn't happy, with her life mostly, but also with us. She said I was too scared to commit, to move out of Mom's house and move into a place with her. Was she right? In a way. In some way, I was just too comfortable where I was. But I don't think she understood my mental state fully, that I became stricken with severe anxiety at the thought of breaking out of familiarity. But then, I could never really articulate it to her. As you said, I'm a reserved chap. I find it hard to talk about how I feel, and that was another thing she didn't like. When did it happen? Last week. I've only told Mom and Dad. I hate causing a fuss. It gave me a kick up the backside, though. I realised that I couldn't stay at home forever. I had to get out. So, I followed in your footsteps. Oh, Jasp. Damn. I'm sorry to hear that. How are you coping? Breakups are never easy, especially your first. I'm more annoyed than anything, because I feel that she wasn't willing to give me a chance. We'd only been together a few months. In the grand scheme of life, that's a very short time. And I'm only 21 years old. Did she expect me to rent or own my own place by now? Sure, I've got enough money saved up to move out, but I may as well prolong it a little longer, until I have more, so I can afford somewhere decent. But will that just become a vicious cycle? You may just get into that mentality until it becomes a familiar cycle you can't break free of. It's always easy to think of excuses not to do something. Jasper sighed into the wind. Maybe you're right. This is why I should open up more, so I can get a fresh perspective, said Jasper, as he felt another fresh spray of seawater tickle his flesh. I've no doubt that I'll start feeling upset soon about the whole breakup, once the annoyance dies down. It's fascinating how 1 minute you can be with someone discussing a life together, a future, and suddenly you're single again, and that person casts you aside as though you were just a stranger. I'm sure it was difficult for her too. I've been the instigator in breakups many times, and there was never a time when it was easy. When it's another person's feelings on the line, it's never easy. You shouldn't be angry at her for something that's beyond your control. I'm not angry at her. I know my tone seems angry. I'm just finding it difficult to process these emotions. The main crux of the breakup was that she wasn't happy with how her life was panning out, and my hesitation didn't help to reassure her. And you're right. It's completely out of my hands. She wasn't nasty about the whole thing either, which has made it harder. especially when they tell you that they still love you, but just can't be with you. If she had cheated, or been really horrible to me, at least I could have brushed it off and been like, oh, what a bitch, never mind, guess I'll move on. Believe me, little brother, if she had been a bitch to you, it still would have hurt. It doesn't matter how amicable or how terrible a breakup happens, it always hurts. Anyway, it served as a good reason to get out of Sedgley and find my feet in this world. At least I can thank her for giving me an unintentional push. Jasper was feeling better, getting the whole ordeal off his chest. But it still took a lot for him to do it. His hands were shaking. He stuffed them into his coat pocket to hide his nervousness from Dalton. You should start writing poetry. It's good to have a creative outlet during dark moments. It helps you escape, and through it you figure out your inner self. Poetry is very good for breakups. Your poems might read like an early 2000s emo song, but you'll feel better for getting it on paper. And you don't have to share it with anyone. Thank you, Dalton. I might just give it a go. I definitely wouldn't show it to anyone. My anxiety is brimming just at the thought of it. Dalton put his free arm around his brother and briefly held him close. Poor old Jasper. I still can't believe it. I'm glad you told me. It's good to talk about these things. And look at you, having grown-up relationships and grown-up breakups. I still remember when you were a little blob of human in the hospital with your jet black baby hair fresh out of the womb. God, how the time has gone. One day Ulysses will be having grown-up relationships and breakups too. Christ, don't say that. I'll be an old man by then. Dalton experienced a moment of melancholy as he wondered if his son, genetically altered by interdimensional experiments, would ever have a normal life with normal relationships and normal breakups. The boat dipped again. This time it dipped deep, and Jasper had to close his eyes and fight off a sudden flare-up of seasickness. You okay, Jasp? Yeah, I like the sea, but the sea doesn't like me. Tell me about it. It took me ages to get over my seasickness. Suddenly Jasper ran to port side and ejected a stream of foul-smelling liquid from his guts. Luckily, he expunged with the wind, so the jet of vomit scattered away into the ocean. Dalton was laughing because he saw himself in his brother when he had first stepped on a boat and could not handle the motion. Jasper joined in with the laughter as he wiped his mouth clean on a tissue from his back pocket. It was the end of summer, and the two brothers were witnessing its demise along Devon's shoreline as the Siren Eater made its way back home. Miles ahead, along the English coastline, the Albatross journeyed.